Hello, I'm Charlotte Curtis, Head of Adult Services with the Livingston Parish Library, here with the final episode of talking about books. I know I've certainly enjoyed going around the parish and talking with different people to find out about the influence that books and libraries have had on their lives. We started this series off with an interview with our library director, and if you haven't seen that one, or any of the other ones, I urge you to go back and look. We've covered a number of people in the parish, from our library director to the parish president, our sheriff, our newspaper publisher, a bookstore owner, and 2 university professors, and all of the interviews have really been wonderful. We're closing up the series today with an interview with Jennifer Seneca, the assistant director of the library. She's going to tell us about books and the impact that they've had on her life. And I can't wait to hear about the books that she's going to talk about. I have no idea what they are. I thought I did, but we had a little conversation before we started filming, and I found out I was all wrong. So welcome, Jennifer. Thanks so much. Oh, I should explain. You will have noticed this looks different from all the other talking about books. That's because we filmed the others right after the library first began having staff back at our facilities. We weren't even having patrons in for most of the time that we were filming talking about books. We were in phase 1 of the recovery. Because the COVID numbers are going up, out of an abundance of caution, we are filming all of our interviews from now on via Zoom. So get used to seeing this. And since this is new technology, I know all of my friends out there are going to forgive me any slip-ups along the way. So Jennifer, thank you, first of all, for walking me through how to do Zoom. I really appreciate everything that you've done, which reminds me, if you missed it, we've been running another series during our summer reading program, Technology Tuesday. Jennifer is the face behind the voice that you would have heard if you watched the first few weeks. She was the one telling you how you could access all the wonderful features that you can access from home with your library card. So if you wondered what the face that went with the voice looked like, now you know. Okay, Jennifer, take it away, please.
So, well, thank you, Miss Charlotte, for inviting me to be one of your interviewees for talking about books. I'm excited about that. And I think that you kind of, when you pitched the idea, you said, think about what got you to reading books, and maybe what has caused you to read the type of books you read now, or what's influenced you and that sort of thing. And it really got me to thinking about the fact that I don't think I ever remember a time without books. My mom was and is a huge reader, and she really encouraged reading. She thought it was highly, highly important for our family and for my brother and I. I have one sibling. And the thing that I remember the most, I believe, from my time as a young child is bedtime and going to bed and being allowed to choose books. And she would read us each a couple of books each night. I can remember being the kid, we would get in trouble, my brother and I, for trying to read after lights off.
Oh, yes.
We were supposed to be in our bunk beds and asleep, and we were sneaking books under the covers and, trying to read books. So it got me to thinking about what were some of the books that were, if anybody has children, right, and you read to them, they latch on to a book, and especially in those formative years where they're learning language. But they tend to latch on to that one book, right? And the one that they want you to read over and over again. I see you rolling your eyes. I know you have an 18-month-old grandson that you're doing that with right now, right? And for me, I got to thinking about what was that book that I always asked to be read. And as I thought about your question, I realized that one book probably really influenced, because I liked it so much, really influenced somewhat the type of reader I am today. And it is the monster at the end of this book
Ha, yes.
with Grover, which was a little golden book back in the day, right? When I was a
Yep.
kid. And this is like an oversized version of a little golden book, but that we have in our collection. And it's a book that family members, when they're about to have their first child, and, if I'm choosing books to give to somebody who's having their first kid, a lot of times that's one of the books that I will include. And when I really think about this book, I think about the fact that as a kid, what I liked the most about it was the thrill of it. My mom was a good reader, right? She, or narrator, I should say, not just she can read well, but she can narrate a book well, right? And she added, little voices or animation or whatnot. And it was the suspense of the book, because the whole book, sorry, spoiler alert, but the whole book, you're trying to figure out who's the monster at the end of the book. I won't give it away if you haven't read it, but in the end, it's really like a kid's version of suspense or mystery, if you think about it.
And you still like that genre.
And that is what I read, right? So
wow.
I do not claim at all to be any type of, I do read, some literary fiction, things on the bestseller list, stuff like that. But my tried and true is I'm going to read mystery, suspense, thriller, fiction a lot. If there's a patron that comes in the library and, if I'm on the floor and I happen to be helping somebody at the circulation desk, and they have, they too are a mystery, suspense, thriller reader, I will pick up that conversation and say, oh, hey, I noticed you like so-and-so. Have you read this person? Have you read that person? And have a bit of a conversation with them, because not just to see if they're looking for other authors to read, but also to see if they're reading somebody I need to know about and I need to try out myself.
I'm struck by your comment about the importance of your mother reading to you. And I know that you've instituted a program here that my 18-month-old brilliant grandson is enrolled in, the preschool program. Would you tell people who may not know about it, about the 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten program, and why you think that's so important?
The 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten program is a nationwide initiative to try to encourage parents to read 1,000 picture books before kindergarten. So if I pick this picture book back up, right, that's what the monster at the end of this book is. It's simple, right, and not a lot of words per page. And what picture books run about 40 pages. You should be able to read one within 5 or 10 minutes. And there's a lot of studies. I won't get into all of the different brain research and studies on reading, but a really high overview would be that if you read 15 minutes to a child every day from birth to age 5, when they are developing the majority of the language that they're going to use, not just as a kid, but for the rest of their life.
Wow.
You learn the majority of your language between ages 0 to 5. And there's a lot of studies out there that show that the more children are read to in those formative years, the better they do in school. Because knowing how to read, knowing how to recognize our alphabet and put those letters together into words and words into sentences and sentences into coherent thought is the basis for anything that you're going to do later on, really. Whether it's writing a report for work, giving a presentation, wherever your life brings you. I think some of our most influential figures, right, in history, whether past or modern, are individuals that know how to use language. And you get that start from being able to read, in my opinion. So 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten is the start to that for parents and children. Besides the bonds I think that parents and children make, with reading together and the familial bond that can be created and such. So 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten, if you read about 15 minutes per day, you're going to easily hit 1,000 books in 5 years. And we don't say that it has to be 1,000 different titles necessarily. It could be the same title 100 times.
Yes.
Because they're gonna need that right around age 2 to 3. Right. when they're really getting heavy into those language skills and becoming a little more independent, and their imagination, their cognitive development is going a little further. So if you visit our website and you go to Beanstack, right now, of course, we are in the midst of summer reading. But
That's
if
right.
you have signed up your young child for summer reading and you didn't sign up for 1,000 books before kindergarten because you weren't quite sure what that was, go and sign up and continue to read to your child. I truly, truly believe it's one of the best things that we can do for our youngest generation is to read to them and expose them to language and to words.
Okay, great. I know that Michael is certainly enjoying being read to. So his parents both and his aunt are fabulous about reading, and I'm glad that it's okay to repeat titles, because when he finds one he likes, we have to hide it to get him to stop.
I understand. I can remember as a child, my brother's favorite book was this Berenstain Bears book called Bears in the Night. I believe that's what the title was, Bears in the Night, where the young bears, they sneak out at night and they have an adventure and then they come back home, right? And I can remember this moment as my brother, who was a toddler, who was so excited because he insisted he knew how to read the book. And so he told our mother, like, he wanted to read the book that night himself. So she let him, like, he turned the pages and it looked like he was reading the book. But when she went back to random pages and started pointing out words, he didn't really recognize the words.
Right.
What he had done was, she had read the book so much to him because he constantly wanted that particular book read. That was his favorite. That he knew the story in order, and he knew when to turn the page. And so it seemed as though he was reading the book. But when you think about it, these are some of the pre-reading skills that children need, to recognize language. And, it was a very strong, like, memory function there, right? That he remembered the whole story. He could remember it in order, when to turn the page, all of that stuff. And so it's those sorts of things that a parent is developing when they're reading to their child. So yes, I agree. They get kind of latched in. When we do story times at the library, a lot of times our story time presenters will open and end story time with the same song, opening and closing song, because little ones, they need that repetition and that structure and sort of that signifier that says, hey, we're beginning and we're ending, and it gives them that sense of comfort, so books are very, very important.
We'd never guessed that you were a children's librarian in a former life, right?
No, you wouldn't, would you? You wouldn't know that that's how I started things out. So
after the monster at the end of the book, then what?
Okay, so after the monster at the end of the book, I would say that until about 4th grade, we lived in a pretty rural area of the state. And I can remember a couple of highlights each week, right? Or every other week. So every week we would go to my great-grandmother's house, and she's going to become important a little bit later in our talk. But every week we would go to my great-grandmother's house for Sunday dinner, which was actually lunchtime. But you know how that goes in the South. It was Sunday dinner. And it was my mom's side of the family. We all went over to my great-grandmother's house on Sundays. And then every week or so, we would take a trip from where we lived, which was kind of out there, down the bayou, as they say. And we would travel to the local public library. Because my mom and dad, they worked hard. They didn't have like a ton of money to spend extraneously on brand new books. So the public library was where my mom brought us to find materials to read. So we always had something to read. And when I got a little bit older, then I think I kind of got through I'm sure I read some Nate the Great and some other things like that in the picture book collection. But when I got older, I discovered Encyclopedia Brown. Now, these days, Encyclopedia Brown, I think this is Encyclopedia Brown in the Case of the Jumping Frogs. So it's a book for juvenile readers and our juvenile.
And it's a mystery.
Right, it's a mystery. Back in the day when I was younger and reading Encyclopedia Brown, they weren't standalone titles like this. This is more modern Encyclopedia Brown stories, which tend to be like one mystery per book. When I was reading them, they were collections of short stories. And I read everything I could get my hands on at the library when it came to Encyclopedia Brown. There were these books over in the adult section my mom would get for me that were called 10-minute mysteries. Anything like that,
Oh, yeah.
I would read. And so I know I read all the Encyclopedia Brown several times when I was a kid. When I got a little bit older, then I jumped to authors like Carolyn B. Cooney and Lewis Duncan. One of the ones I specifically remember, and this is an old copy, doesn't even have a pretty cover, but it is, for any of you that might be out there about my age and we're reading all these books, The Face on the Milk Carton, which is about a young woman. I can't remember right offhand if she was in middle school or what, but if you remember at school when you got milk in actual cartons and not a plastic pouch, sorry to chuckle, but sometimes they would run the pictures of missing children on the carton, right? And this is what happened to this young girl. She gets a carton of milk and she sees her own face on the carton. And that's the mystery, from there. So, I read all those, what's now considered classics, when I was a kid, The Face in the Milk Carton and The View from the Cherry Tree and, all of those sorts of books. So yeah, it continued for me from the point of Grover to today, but that was a lot of what I was reading in middle school and high school. So,
wow.
When high school came along and it was time to get my first job, preparing to go out and graduate and go out into the world, and I was trying to figure out where I wanted to try to work. My mom made this offhand comment. She was like, well, have you thought about the library? I worked at a library when I was in college, and it was a great job to have while I was working at college. And I thought, well, I'm there a lot, with my family. Why not try it?
Might as well get paid, right?
Right. I threw my application in, and I ended up being hired at my local public library at the time. And they placed me in the children's department because I was very active in the high school theater group at my high school at the time. And so they thought that some skills that I had with that theater group at high school would translate well to help the head of youth services at the time with story times.
Sure.
She did a lot of puppet shows, presentations in front of kids. And so even though I was just a student worker, I had this great opportunity where I was able to help with a lot of those things. They gave me this amazing foundation. And I come from a family of educators. Most of my family are in the teaching profession. And I thought before working at the library that I too would end up going into the teaching profession. And when I got into libraries, I realized it was really a lot of what I enjoyed the most, especially at that time working with kids in libraries. I was able to be a bit silly and do story times and presentations and encourage reading, something that I felt very strongly about. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. So that's how I started out, from being a reader to actually entering libraries. And that's been my career now for, like 25 or more years.
Wow.
I've kind of hit a milestone there, but yeah.
That's great. And it all started with Grover.
It all started with Grover, yes. So I have a huge affinity for the Muppets, actually.
Well, I mean, who doesn't, right?
Yeah, exactly. But Grover being one of my favorites. But yeah, all started with there's a monster at the end of this book featuring Grover.
That's amazing. I really liked what you said about giving new parents or prospective parents books, because that's something that I always like to do too. I don't think that you can overemphasize how important it is, not, as you said, for bonding, which is of course fabulous, but the child is learning vocabulary, sentence structure, everything that will help make that child achieve success later in life, whether the person winds up working in a library, being an educator, whatever. we all have to be able to speak and communicate. And it really, really does start when they're teeny tiny. And you're right, their minds are just like sponges and they absorb so much. I was very excited to see that we started that 1,000 books before kindergarten program. I think that's great. And I'm delighted. I know that you had hoped to be able to have little celebrations when people reached milestones, which obviously we can't do right now with our current crisis, but sometime in the future,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
we'll be able to get together when people hit 100 books or 200 books. And
our youth services department is working on that and trying to figure out what we're going to do. It's not something that we've given up on yet. So we will definitely find a way. But to kind of, I guess, jump off of what you just said about vocabulary, one of the things that has struck me a little bit here and there in my life is sometimes in conversation with other individuals, every once in a while, I'll use a word and somebody will go, I've never heard that word. What does that mean? Which every once in a while I'm like, what do you mean you don't know that word? Not that I say that, but and then I remember, and I have to truly admit, like for me and the way my memory works.
Yes.
Those calendar of days, they give you dictionary words.
I love those.
Some people open up a dictionary and they try, they learn a new word every week. My brain doesn't work that way. It needs context. And for me, my whole vocabulary that I've learned over the years is strictly from reading. It's from reading a book, whether when I was a kid, especially, that might have been just a touch beyond, where my vocabulary was, but I was able, I knew the majority of it. And if I, didn't know what the word was, it only took my mom a couple of times to say, well, go look it up. And then, we would go to the dictionary, we would look it up, we would, see the definition of the word and then figure out, well, based on that word and that sentence in the book, what is the syntax? What is the sentence structure with the word telling me, sort of thing, more advanced, more complicated, let's say, English concepts or English language concepts or any language you're reading in, really. When you're reading that you don't even realize you're learning when you're reading for pleasure. And I think that's the biggest thing for kids is, a lot of times they're giving a lot to read and it's an assignment which is necessary, but sometimes it kind of takes the pleasure of it out of it, right? When somebody says, you must read this. And you have to sometimes. There's certainly a lot of things I have to read in the course of my job that I see Charlotte's going, some of those things you make me read.
Yes, some of those things are from her head of adult services.
Right. And I can't say that that's always the stuff that, I'm like, all right, I'm going to read this report and it's going to be the highlight, right? But it's necessary. Yeah. And you have to get through it. But I think the times, especially for kids, that they get the most out of reading is when you can connect enjoyment with it, whether it's a story about a topic they're really interested in, or it's just they've been able to choose the book on their own and find that time and, have that time with that book, because reading for them does so much more than just, I'm learning vocabulary, right? So something that, it's been so long since I've read this study, but something that I know some people are trying to continue to encourage with young children today is that their world is so visual, right? So we have TV, we have YouTube and videos and things like that, that some studies have found that some children sometimes have trouble with visualization. So
yes, because they don't need to think.
The concept of, close your eyes and can you see everything on your desk and where it is, that you can recreate that image in your head. And reading helps with that. Because if you think about when you read and you have a lot of description, then that's what you're doing in your head, which is why we have difficulty, right, when a book is made into a movie or a TV
yes, because they don't look right.
Right. It doesn't look right, or the world that's created in the book doesn't seem quite right in the movie or the TV show, right? Because we have an image in our head. And reading helps that with kids. It helps that visualization, and it helps their imagination, which helps them later in life. Like all of that. That's, to me, that's why I feel like the cornerstone of a lot of what we do in life is getting a good basis and a good foundation in reading.
That's
so
great.
have I pounded on that point enough?
I don't think you can. I don't think it's possible to overemphasize how important reading is at every stage of your life, because what you just said, when you read, you do recreate a world in your head, and that keeps those synapses in your brain firing, and it's just very valuable. And let me confess, I stayed up until 1 last night in bed because I started a suspense novel for the book club on Thursday, and I wanted to see how it ended. And I kept thinking, okay, at the end of the chapter, and then you go, okay, it's only 20 more pages. Come on, I
Like
gotta
potato
finish.
chips, right? Like just one more.
Yes, it was definitely like
I'm
potato
just one
chips.
more page, one more page. I promise I can get through work tomorrow on 3 hours of sleep, no problem.
Yes, I did only hit the alarm button once, but it was great. So thank you. I really appreciate you. First of all, I appreciate your support. You've been wonderful. I can see now why you're so good at explaining things, because you come from that long line of educators, which you still are. It's just in a different venue,
Different way.
you know. So you've continued the family tradition. But again, it's Charlotte Curtis, Head of Adult Services, and our guest today was Jennifer Seneca, Assistant Director for the Livingston Parish Library. We've been talking about books, and I hope you've enjoyed this series this summer. Please remember to go into your Beanstack account for a couple of things. First, to log this video for your participation towards a weekly drawing or the grand prize drawing for the adult summer reading program. But if you know a child that's not in kindergarten yet, and he or she has not yet been enrolled in the 1,000 books before kindergarten, please look at it on our website and please enroll that child. The dividends, both for you and for the child, are just astronomical. So keep reading, and thank you for joining us. Goodbye.
Goodbye.